again, everybody. I'm BrianTheBlue, and welcome back to Current Calamities, where I take a break from the past to look forward to the future with the games of the present.
Have you played Atari today?
Atari 50, the anniversary celebration, the latest compilation of games to come from the original innovators that were Atari in honor of its 50th year as a company.
Now you may be wondering what makes this different from all the other collections and flashbacks released over the years. Well, I got two words for ya. Digital Eclipse. You know, the same guys that made this? The year of collections continues!
Those of you that know me or watch my other shows know that I'm an avid Atari collector, so it may not surprise you that I have a good chunk of what this game has in its library. From what I counted, I have about 40 of the console games in my collection, all complete in box, while I have access to around 13 of their arcade machines featured. That's about half the library that I'm very much familiar with.
Doesn't matter to me if I played the games or not, as all of this is just right up my alley. I've been celebrating myself getting some Atari merch for the occasion, and I even got the Steelbook version with its stylish poster. It sure is a bitch to get it out of its sleeve. There we go. Let's play some Atari.
You would also think this would be nothing more than just a simple collage of games slapped into a cartridge with nothing else besides a fancy menu and interface. Well, you would be wrong again, as they pulled out all the stops to make this historic game go with the event. You have the games, sure, but you can choose to explore them chronologically by going through 5 timelines that are of historic note to Atari. I'm starting with the arcade origins, and I was already amazed by all the detail put into it. We jump right into its very beginning as Syzygy and the first coin-operated game Computer Space. We see documentary footage of when the game was being made and new interviews about it now.
You could argue that this game itself is an interactive documentary, because you get to learn about Atari as a company and play some of its historic games.
And there's no better game to play first than arguably its most popular game ever, and the one that started the arcade craze, Pong. You get the classic paddles and ball in all its glory, and you can play as much of it to your heart's content. Only problem here is that it's 2-player only, so you have to play it by yourself, or unless you have someone else around to take the other Joy-Con. But chances of that are slim to none in my house.
Hey Brian, you want to play the original Pong? Okay, I get the point. I'm using this as a shield because you ain't shooting it.
I'm very much impressed by the presentation and everything they were able to gather. Pong, of course, got a lot of attention, and some industry experts and those that were there discussed its impact and the legendary stories like the test machine breaking because it was full of quarters. Of course, I can't go over everything in great detail, but I'm glad they had the time to highlight other significant games like the controversial Gotcha or the precursor to Simon, Touch Me.
Nice flyer, right? I should know. I have it and the handheld.
They even go over their shell company key games, its failure in the pinball scene, and even their strange little music visualizer they sold at one point that's now a collector's item. Rest assured I'll own it one day. We got games in between like Breakout, done by the founders of Apple, and Fire Truck, the unique co-op driving game.
Some of these arcade games and a good majority of the games that are on here are ones I've done videos on. If you want to see them, just go looking around my quick view playlist and you're bound to find several of them.
Wish I could keep going here, but there's so much more to explore, so let's go into the timeline I'm most familiar with, being when Atari brought their brand of gaming home. The Atari VCS/2600 was of course going to be the feature showing on one of these timelines, and that is exactly what we got. We go over its birth and its launch games and the gatefold boxes, which I have almost all of them. I also love how they thought about putting things into perspective by showing the source code for combat. This is all it took to make a 4KB game.
It's amazing what they could do and would go on to do for something that was only made to play this and this. This also reminds me that Atari really did focus on fun for the whole family, as most of their early games, if not all of them, had multiplayer in there somewhere. They tried to emphasize it in their ads, and I try to emphasize it in my reviews. I even get my mother in on the act when making some of the 2600 QVs. I put together some bloopers that you can find elsewhere. Here's a clip of what you can expect.
Oh no, I'm wide open! Ah!
The classic in Warlords is present along with some other notable titles like Super Breakout, that was a good paddle game. Wish you could play it with a paddle, it's so much better than the sticks. Dodge 'em is always fun to play, sometimes forget how addicting it can be. But the heavy hitters have to be Yar's Revenge, the original masterpiece brought to us by Howard Scott Warshaw, Missile Command for being the outstanding port that it is despite being on inferior hardware, and the all-important and dare I say infamous Adventure, made famous for being the first widely known game to contain an Easter egg. If you read through the lines and listened to the interviews, you'd think the Atari of old was one of the worst places to work at. It's not represented in the best light, and honestly, that's commendable for them to allow. I mean, what would you do if you just made the best-selling game for the 2600, and all you got for it was a coupon for a turkey? I'd quit and find a Magic too. Haunted House, another classic and a cornerstone of the survival horror genre. But you may be one of those high-strung guys who want to impress your babe and say, "This ain't scary, I'm a tough guy." Well, you think you could keep that up when you play Haunted Houses? Digital Eclipse didn't just go to the trouble of porting all the games to a modern system, they went the extra mile of reimagining a select few of the library and giving them a new lease on life. This is an awesome idea, and in my opinion, they executed it quite well. I thoroughly enjoyed Neo Breakout and the enhanced Yar's Revenge, but I think Haunted Houses is my favorite just because how modern and cute they made the retro style look, and because I found a secret of my own. Oh, hell yeah! I unlocked basic math! I never thought I'd be excited for a math game, but let's go! I got through all of that section, which appropriately and unfortunately leads to the dark days of not just Atari, but video games in general with the crash. Everyone knows or should know about the video game crash of 1983, where the entire industry as a whole almost went bust due to a number of causes. They take the slow approach, easing us into the troubled time, but not before highlighting some of the good that came before it, like Demons to Diamonds. Fun game, another original hit. They put a lot of emphasis on the Atari Age magazine, which is kinda cool. Now you know where the name of the website came from. And they also touch upon the Sword Quest games that I looked at not too long ago. Now we have all these great scans of the comics and box art. Oh, they're so pretty. More so than even having them myself. Eventually we did get to the 5200, the super system that was meant to be the 2600 successor, but failed miserably on its own thanks to a number of reasons, like the controller, not the best selection of launch games to convince others to buy in, and the fact that 2600 was just so popular. And sexy with wood grain. I'm one of the few that love the 5200, and I'm coming close to getting a complete library, but even I can't deny how much of a misstep this was. But Digital Eclipse, to their credit, did their best to make the 5200 version of Star Raiders seem epic. Like, holy cow, I wasn't expecting to get a Gore for Space Encounters type of bezel. The 5200 was only part of the large problem, at least when it comes to the Atari story, but unfortunately we're not able to explore those aspects as it comes down to those games not really being theirs. The general consensus is that the crash began and culminated with two games, Pac-Man and E.T., each were licensed out from arcade giant Namco and movie studio Universal respectively, and so they probably didn't want to go through the trouble of licensing them out again for this collection, as both more than likely cost an arm and a leg to acquire, and it's a shame cause they're both really essential to the story of Atari and the crash. To be fair, they don't entirely gloss over it, E.T. is at least mentioned or shown in the interview portions, but it just sucks we can't play those versions in the modern day. Instead, we have the Real Sports series. I mean, they fit the narrative of the growing competition within television, but we didn't need to play all the damn sports games, even if we did get the basketball prototype. I think the one and only gripe I and some others would have is not being able to play third-party or licensed titles. Even though this is more a celebration of the company and their software, The games made by others are just as important to the history of Atari and their systems during its highs and lows.
So not only can we not play these games synonymous with the crash, but we also can't play the highly popular port of Space Invaders, any Activision classics like Pitfall or Kaboom, Raiders to make Howard's story come full circle, so much trash but many treasures to be found on third party, but the problem doesn't stop at the 2600. They could have made the 5200 look more appealing by showing what the likes of Activision and Parker Brothers were doing, or at least show more ports for comparison's sake. Who wouldn't want to try out Mario Brothers from the 7800 on a Nintendo system? And they may have Tempest 2000 from the Jaguar, but we can't have Alien vs. motherfucking Predator. I thought Klax would make an appearance, maybe on the links, but it never showed up. It may not be the 90s anymore, but there's still time for it.
I'm ranting a bit, and as I said, they touch upon these things when appropriate. I just wish the world was just a little more perfect and workarounds can be made on such things, especially if they haven't seen other use since its original incarnation. I mean, what harm would it do to Pac-Man's reputation if people saw what Atari did to him?
They didn't seem to care when they used the box art as wallpaper for his museum.
But for what this collection lacks in historical significance, they make up for it in providing the unique and obscure games. Their heavy inclusion of the Atari Age magazine certainly makes more sense when they let us play the extremely rare titles only sold through it. I mean, I never knew a whole lot about Quadrum before this came out, but now I'm intrigued by its similarity to Space Zap, and being the only cartridge to use voice synthesis as far as I know, they obviously had to include the last Sword Quest game in Waterworld, prematurely concluding the contest that coincided with it, and I consider myself lucky to have just the cartridge.
But Digital Eclipse made the deal even sweeter, cause for the first time anywhere, we can play and see a version of what the last Sword Quest game, Air World, could have been like.
Apparently they were able to get some design documents and create a version that might have fit the Air theme and finish Sword Quest's legacy, and it certainly plays like a Sword Quest game where you collect items and go from room to room, looking like it has something to do with the I Ching, but I'm having some trouble believing their story when they put in a Space Invaders type minigame, as well as what looks like a Flappy Bird ripoff as well.
I think I'd rather see those documents, or better yet, see if they could recreate this on real hardware. It's a good replication, but if Solaris could pull off what it could, they could have attempted it with Air World.
Still, I'm pretty satisfied with what I got to play. There's still a lot more to go, but I'm gonna leave it there for everyone else to discover. I still have to finish up their arcade origins and the crash, but I still have to go through their computer history, plus their semi-return to hardware manufacturing and into the future. But of course, games will always play a factor, and there's still so many to play. And I tend to go for the hard-to-find machines or prototypes because that's where my interest lies. Plus, why not get good at them just on the off chance you find them at a convention?
I have heard of this AKR game. Wonder what it's about. Bro. Whoa. Oh, this is so hype. Why didn't they release it? It's so cool, AKR. So with all that being said, what's my overall opinion?
When I heard this was among the many things happening for Atari's 50th anniversary, and saw the amount of effort being put into the history, the preservation, and the story of the company, I just knew I had to get it as it just spoke to the historian in me. Atari 50 is by far the best compilation game ever made. Maybe it created its own subgenre of game collections for when it has an abundance of resources, interviews, and games on top of it all. I wouldn't mind classifying it in a genre all its own. Maybe missing some noteworthy games, but it sure as hell makes up for it with a deep library of classics and obscurities that will take a while for anyone to get bored with. I recommend anyone, whether you grew up with an Atari or not, are a fan of Atari or not, to pick this game up. It's one part of gaming history all wrapped up into one nice package, and you can play the greats like Food Fight and see if you can beat my score of 800,000 that I achieved at Game On last year. By the way, if anyone at Digital Eclipse just so happens to watch this, can I buy y'all some pizza and drinks so you can hire me to the team? You seem like a fun bunch to work with if you're preserving all this history. So what do you think? Do you agree with me, or have your own thoughts? Let me know by leaving a comment. If you like what you see, like the video with those thumbs up. If you think anyone else would like this vid, share it around. And if you want to see more of me, this show, and others, hit the subscribe button. I'm BrianTheBlue, thanks for watching. I'm going back to the past, and until next time, I'll see you in the future.